I was only 15 when I died, and Jesus showed me what will happen before 2026. I saw oceans swallowing cities, entire coastlines vanishing in hours. I saw a great silence as blackouts swept across nations and the noise of the world fell away. And I saw a sickness that spread fear more than disease, dividing hearts and isolating souls. But in every vision, I also saw hope for those who would turn to him. My name is Abigail Grace Miller. I was 15 years old the day I died. I never thought much about death before. I was just an ordinary high school sophomore from a quiet town in Texas. The day began like any other, sunlight spilling across the Texas fields, birds chattering in the trees, and the spring air smelling of grass and earth. Abigail laced her sneakers, still sleepy, but persuaded by her best friend Hannah to go hiking. Her sketchbook lay half-finished on her desk at home, pages smudged with drawings of flowers and skies, but she promised herself she would return to it later. She had no idea she would never return to that desk the same. The trail was quiet except for their laughter, two girls teasing about classmates and humming to the music still echoing in their ears. But halfway up the ridge, Abigail felt the first tightness in her chest. She slowed, brushing it off as nothing. Yet within moments, it grew crushing, as if unseen hands pressed hard against her ribs. She staggered. Her breath grew ragged. Hannah's smile faded into panic. Abigail managed only 2 words, "I can't," before her vision blurred. The trees around her bent into haze, colors dissolving like watercolor dropped into water. Cold spread through her limbs. Hannah's voice grew faint, muffled, as if she were speaking from under a lake. Abigail fell back onto a rock, eyes rolling, body collapsing. And then, silence. Not the silence of fainting, not the silence of sleep, the silence of separation. Abigail was still aware. She stood, yet when she turned, she saw her own body lying limp on the ground. Hannah shook her, tears streaking her cheeks, fingers trembling as she fumbled with her phone to call for help. Abigail opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. Her voice did not belong to the world anymore. The fear of death should have risen then. Instead, something else appeared, a light. It wasn't the sun. It pulsed with warmth, alive, flowing, and it called her name, not with sound but with knowing. Every part of her leaned toward it. The trail, Hannah's cries, the trees, they all faded behind. Abigail felt herself rise, lighter than air, as though gravity itself had loosened its grip. She could see every detail below, even the silver clip glinting in Hannah's hair, but it was already receding into distance. The pull of the light was stronger. A tunnel opened, swirling with colors she had no words for, shades that carried warmth, scents, even emotions. She drifted toward it, peace flooding her soul. The pain in her chest was gone. The fear of leaving was gone. She was between 2 worlds, and one was already calling her home. The last thing she saw on earth was Hannah pressing her hands desperately against her still chest, sobbing, refusing to let go. But Abigail was already somewhere else. The tunnel enfolded Abigail like a blanket stitched from light itself. It wasn't static, wasn't just brightness. It moved with purpose, alive, aware. Colors spiraled around her, not the pale hues of earthly rainbows but shades so deep they seemed to carry sound, fragrance, and memory. Each current of color touched her differently. One brought the comfort of her grandmother's arms, another the crisp freshness of spring rain, another the gentleness of a lullaby long forgotten. She realized she was being carried, not falling, not floating, but guided. Fear was absent. In its place came wonder, and beneath the wonder a trembling question. Where was this leading? She sensed the answer before she could form the words. Someone was waiting. Then the tunnel widened, and there he stood. At first, it was only radiance, brighter than the sun, yet strangely gentle on her sight. As the radiance drew closer, it took the shape of a figure, tall, strong, clothed not in fabric, but in light flowing from within. His eyes met hers, and she knew without doubt, Jesus. Her knees buckled though she had no body. The sheer weight of his presence pressed her soul low, not in terror, but in awe. His gaze pierced through her like lightning through glass. Every thought, every word, every secret lay open. She wanted to turn away, but she couldn't. She was known completely. And then came the shock. She was loved completely. Love unlike any she had felt. Not the fragile love of approval, not the fleeting love of teenage crushes, not even the steady love of family. This love was fire that purified even as it embraced. She began to weep, though tears did not fall. Her whole being trembled, undone. He spoke her name. Abigail. The sound was not volume, but truth. It struck deeper than sound could go. At once she felt every wound, every scar, every lonely night soothed by the fact that he knew her, and still he loved her. She whispered in her heart, Am I dead? His eyes softened. Your body is between worlds, but there is something I must show you. He reached out his hand. She hesitated. She, a 15-year-old who had barely believed he cared, now face to face with eternity. Then she took his hand. The moment their hands touched, a surge of love stronger than electricity coursed through her. Wounds inside she didn't even know she carried. Harsh words, broken trust, silent doubts, were healed instantly. She gasped, not with lungs but with soul, as though she were breathing for the first time. They walked together on a path of light. Each step felt weightless. The air shimmered with fragrance sweet and clean, something like blossoms after rain, but infinitely more. There was no sound except his voice and the hum of living light surrounding them. In that silence, trust grew. She knew she belonged. Then the scene shifted. The tunnel dissolved into a vast, open expanse. Beneath them stretched the earth itself, like a living map glowing under a veil of heaven. Mountains and seas curved across continents, and every detail pulsed with life. Before you return, he said, you must understand. Your life has meaning far greater than you know. And what I will show you is not to cause fear, but to prepare hearts. These things will take place before the year 2026. Abigail's pulse quickened. She wanted to protest. She was only a girl, but his eyes held her steady, full of both sorrow and strength. The events will be dangerous, he continued, but not without hope. For those who seek me, these days will be a season of awakening. For those who refuse, it will be a time of shaking. The ground beneath them shimmered. Her life unfolded before her eyes. Childhood memories, her grandmother's cobbler, kindnesses she had long forgotten, rose vivid. Then darker moments, cruel words, lies, laughter at someone else's expense. Each pierced her with guilt. She looked at Jesus, expecting condemnation. Instead, she saw truth wrapped in love. I know every part of you, he said, and yet my love for you has never changed. Every act of kindness is eternal. Every choice to wound also matters. Life is a tapestry of eternity. Nothing is wasted. Her soul broke, not in despair, but in relief. She was fully known and fully loved. Then he lifted her hand again. Now, he said, you are ready to see the first of the events. The oceans beneath Abigail shifted like restless giants. From their calm blue sheen, a darker movement spread, and she felt the vibration of it even where she stood in the light with Jesus. At first it looked like tides rolling too far inland. Then the waves rose higher, swallowing coastlines like ink spreading across paper. She gasped as entire neighborhoods vanished beneath roiling water. Cities she recognized, New Orleans, Miami, Jakarta, Manila, drowned in minutes. Streets she had once seen in pictures, dry and alive with people, now churned with violent seas. Cars bobbed like toys, houses folded like paper, lights flickered once and were gone. The roar of the waves carried with it panic, confusion, despair. The main emotion pressing on Abigail was terror, not for herself, but for the millions she could almost feel. Their cries seemed to echo through her own chest. She could sense the desperation of parents clutching children, the shock of neighbors frozen in place, the hollow silence of those who realized there was nowhere to run. She turned to Jesus, eyes wide, voice shaking. What is this? Is this punishment? His hand squeezed hers, steady as an anchor. His eyes filled with sorrow. The earth is groaning, Abigail. Creation strains under the weight of humanity's neglect. These are not punishments from my hand. They are the fruits of what has been sown. The tidbit of knowledge struck her with clarity. The disasters were not random. They were consequences, climate strained, oceans rising, the planet itself groaning. The waters surged faster. She saw island nations vanish first, their voices crying out. Shorelines dissolved in hours. The world's maps were redrawn in days. Abigail's heart ached as she saw children swept into chaos, mothers screaming, fathers diving into waves that gave no mercy. She wanted to close her eyes, to look away. But Jesus' hand held hers firm. Do not turn away. See, so you may tell. And then, something unexpected. Amid the chaos, light. A man pulled strangers from the water, lifting them onto rooftops. A woman carried an elderly neighbor on her back through waist-high flood. Churches opened doors, not for members only but for anyone who staggered in. Abigail saw neighbors sharing food, children leading songs on rooftops, hands clasped across cultural and language divides. Her chest swelled with another emotion now, hope. It was fragile, flickering like a candle in a storm, but it glowed. Jesus spoke, his voice steady. The waters will test compassion. In disaster, some will choose selfishness. Others will discover a strength they never knew. And in turning toward one another, many will also turn toward me. She watched as nations long at odds began sending aid to each other. Military planes dropped food instead of bombs. Relief workers pulled strangers from the same rubble, and prayers rose across languages. Abigail saw a group of children huddled in a shelter, their voices singing worship through tears, and the sound pierced the roar of waves like a hymn cutting darkness. Still, her heart trembled. When will this happen? She whispered. Before this decade ends, Jesus said. His words were calm, but the weight in them sank like stone. Some will see it sooner than others, but all will feel the shaking. Abigail trembled. She was just 15. How could she carry this? Yet she knew this vision was not for curiosity, but for preparation. The scene beneath began to fade, the roar of the sea softening into silence. Light returned, wrapping her in calm, though her spirit still quaked. Jesus' gaze met hers again, filled with both tenderness and resolve. This is only the first, he said. 2 more remain. Each will test the heart in a different way. Abigail steadied herself, breath hitching, knowing she had only begun. The oceans faded from view, and Abigail stood again in the brilliance of living light. Her soul still trembled from the roar of the waters, but Jesus' presence steadied her. The air around them began to shift. What replaced the flood was not movement, but stillness, an eerie, consuming quiet that seemed to press on every side. Beneath her feet the world appeared again, stretched out like a map. At first, cities sparkled in the night, clusters of light, electricity humming like veins of fire. But then, one by one, the lights flickered and went dark. Entire skylines collapsed into black. First a single city, then another, then whole regions swallowed in silence. Abigail leaned forward, heart racing. Is this war? Are they being attacked? Jesus shook his head. His voice was calm, but heavy with truth. Not war, at least not in the way you think. What you see is a failure of the systems man has trusted more than me. The noise that filled their lives will fall away, and in that silence, hearts will be revealed. The main emotion flooding Abigail now was unease. The darkness was not violent like the floods, yet it felt just as terrifying. A city without light, a world without sound. No engines, no phones, no screens, only silence. She watched people rush to windows, staring at blackened streets. Cell phones went dead in their hands. Computers blanked. Families sat in living rooms, waiting for the hum of electricity to return, but it didn't. The quiet pressed into their souls like weight. Panic rose quickly. Stores filled with people grasping for whatever they could. Arguments flared in the dark aisles. Suspicion spread like sparks in dry grass. But then Abigail saw something unexpected. In some neighborhoods, candles flickered in windows. Families gathered around small flames, eating together, speaking to one another without glowing screens between them. Neighbors who had never exchanged words now shared food by lantern light. Children laughed in backyards, their voices carrying through the night. Old guitars and violins emerged from closets, their music weaving into the silence. The tidbit of knowledge sank into Abigail's heart. When the lights of man go out, the light of God shines brighter. Prayer circles formed in parks, driveways, and kitchens. People held hands, whispering words of faith they had forgotten. Abigail saw mothers opening Bibles that had sat dusty for years. She saw men humbling themselves, admitting their fear, and praying aloud for the first time. Jesus' voice wrapped around her like a calm breeze. When the noise is silenced, many will hear me for the first time. The great silence will test trust. Some will turn to fear and isolation. Others will find me in the stillness. The choice will shape their future. But not all responded with hope. Abigail saw homes barricaded, doors locked tight, people glaring at neighbors as enemies. Fear thickened in some hearts until suspicion ruled. Families argued, splitting under the strain of distrust. Where candles glowed, peace reigned. Where fear ruled, shadows pressed closer. Abigail shivered. The silence of machines had revealed the silence of hearts. She thought of her own life, how often she drowned quiet moments with music, phones, and screens. She realized how little space she had left for God's voice. The vision shifted, fading into light again. Her spirit felt heavy with both dread and wonder. The floods had tested compassion. The silence had tested trust. Jesus looked at her, steady and unshakable. 2 visions have been shown. 1 remains. It will test love itself. Abigail braced herself, not knowing what could be harder than water or silence. But she knew she would not face it alone. The glow of the second vision dimmed, and Abigail felt the air around her grow colder. A heaviness pressed on her spirit, not like the silence of power gone out, but something darker. Shadows began to stretch across the map of the world, curling through cities and towns, slipping into homes and hearts. She shivered, clinging tighter to Jesus' hand. Then she saw it. People moving quickly, faces pale, eyes darting with unease. Some wore masks. Others closed themselves inside their houses, blinds pulled tight. Streets that should have been alive with voices and laughter were strangely empty. The sickness had come. At first Abigail thought the illness itself was the great danger. Coughs shaking bodies, breaths labored, hospitals overflowing. But as she watched, she realized something deeper was happening. Fear was moving faster than disease. Suspicion spread between neighbors, friends avoided one another, even families drew apart. Her chest tightened. The main emotion here was grief, not only for the pain of sickness, but for the division it created. She had never seen love unravel so quickly. On her right, Abigail saw figures in authority, their mouths issuing commands. At first the words seemed protective, rules, regulations, but beneath them was another current, control. Doors closed, communities fractured, and fear grew heavy, pressing hearts apart. But then she looked again, and in the shadows she saw sparks. A nurse held a patient's hand when no family was allowed inside. A teenager delivered groceries to an elderly neighbor, leaving them on the porch with a note of love. In a wide field, groups gathered quietly, voices rising in worship under the open sky. Even in sickness, hope was not gone. Jesus' voice came, steady, carrying both sorrow and strength. The sickness will test love. Many will let fear rule them. But those who belong to me will not close their hearts. They will be wise, but they will still love. And in their example, courage will grow. The tidbit of knowledge pressed into Abigail's heart. Fear divides, but love endures even in the dark. She turned toward him, confusion and pain in her eyes. Why allow this at all? His gaze did not waver. It is not my will that suffering comes. Humanity has turned from me, from one another. These are the fruits of that path. Yet even this I will use to draw people back. When comfort is gone, truth will be seen. Abigail looked down again. She saw small homes glowing with prayer, golden threads of faith weaving between them like fireflies in the dark. And she saw other homes sunk in despair, isolation turning to anger, anger into hopelessness. The same storm had produced two responses, one of division, one of deeper love. Her grief began to mingle with awe. Even in sickness, the choice was clear. She understood why Jesus had shown her this, so she could tell others before fear came knocking at their doors. The vision faded, the shadows thinning into light. Jesus' voice wrapped around her like a shield. 3 visions are complete. Water tested compassion. Silence tested trust. Fear tested love. Now you must see what lies beyond these trials. Abigail's spirit trembled. If the world itself was shaken this way, what could lie beyond? She held tighter to his hand, knowing the answer would be more than she imagined. The warmth of the light faded, replaced by a weight so heavy Abigail could barely breathe. The air grew thick, gray at first, then darker, until even the memory of color seemed to vanish. A sound rose in the distance, faint at first, then overwhelming, wailing, crying, voices twisted with agony. Abigail clung to Jesus' hand. What is this place? She whispered, though she already feared the answer. Shapes appeared in the gloom. People, though broken and bent in ways no body should be. Faces twisted by torment, eyes wide with regret. Some screamed curses, others begged for mercy. Others wept with hopelessness that never ended. Abigail's heart pounded with dread. She realized the main emotion was despair, pure and endless, heavier than the floods, colder than the silence, darker than the sickness. This, Jesus said, his voice carrying both sorrow and authority, is the place prepared for the devil and his angels. It was never my will that any human soul come here. But those who reject me choose to stand apart from my presence, and this is the result. Abigail trembled. She wanted to cry out, to reach them, to pull them back. But she could see it in their eyes. Every moment they had been offered truth replayed endlessly. Every time they had hardened their hearts, every excuse, every mockery of faith, each choice to walk away. There was no forgetting here, no second chance, only remembering forever. The tidbit of knowledge carved into her soul. Hell is not God's cruelty, but humanity's refusal of love. Separation here is complete, not because God cast them out, but because they would not turn to him when the door was open. Abigail wept without tears. She saw a man clutching a coin that turned to dust, over and over, whispering deals and numbers into nothing. She saw a woman tracing wounds in her mind, refusing forgiveness even here. Leaders recited speeches into the void, applause forever gone. Every chain was forged by their own choices, greed, anger, pride, lust, all hardened into destiny. Her knees buckled. I can't bear this, she whispered. Please, take me away. Jesus' gaze pierced her, wet with compassion. You must see, Abigail, so you will understand what is at stake. Heaven and hell are not symbols. They are eternal realities. My desire is that none should perish, but love cannot be forced. Every soul must choose. A roar rose from deeper in the abyss, not human, but ancient, filled with malice so fierce that even the shadows shrank back. Abigail recoiled, terror coursing through her spirit. But Jesus' hand steadied her. "You are safe with me," he said. The cries grew louder, echoing in her ears, burning into her heart. She knew she would carry them forever, not as fear, but as fire for her mission. She would never again treat eternity as a distant idea. It was real. It was final. And then, just as suddenly, they began to rise. The darkness thinned. The wailing faded into echoes. Light returned, soft at first, then stronger, until the weight lifted from her chest. She gasped, as if breathing freely for the first time. Her soul ached, but she understood. If she had doubted before, she could never doubt again. Hell was real, and she had to warn the world before it was too late. The suffocating darkness fell away like a heavy curtain pulled back, and Abigail blinked as her spirit adjusted to brightness more radiant than the sun. This time the light didn't sting, it healed. It poured over her like warm rain, soaking into every part of her being until her trembling eased. Her grief from what she had just seen began to lift, though the memory would never fade. Before her stretched a vast land alive with color, yet no color she had ever known on earth. Gold shimmered like liquid sunlight, greens pulsed with life, blues danced like flowing rivers of glass. The very air seemed to breathe with music, not from instruments, but from creation itself. The ground beneath her feet felt alive, as if every step sang praise. She gasped, heart pounding. "Where are we?" she whispered, though she already sensed the answer. Jesus smiled, his presence brighter here than ever before. "This is the home prepared for those who belong to me." Heaven. Voices rose, not in confusion or despair, but in harmony. Countless souls lifted songs that carried no language barrier, each note clear, yet woven perfectly into one great hymn. Abigail felt the sound not just in her ears, but in her soul. It wrapped around her like an embrace, filling her with joy so fierce it made her weep. The main emotion here was peace, not the fragile peace of a quiet evening, but a deep, unbreakable peace that filled every longing, every crack, every hidden ache. She saw families reunited, faces radiant with joy. She saw children laughing without fear, elders walking strong and free. She saw angels moving like flames of light, their compassion and strength undeniable. And at the center of it all was the throne, radiating a love so vast she could hardly breathe. She dropped to her knees. She couldn't lift her eyes to its brilliance. Yet even from the edge of its radiance, she felt it. Love deeper than oceans, steadier than mountains, stronger than fire. The tidbit of knowledge struck her heart with clarity. Heaven was not a reward for perfection, but a gift for the forgiven. None here had earned it. All were clothed in grace. Tears poured, though not like earthly tears of pain. These were tears of release, of belonging, of knowing she had been made for this. Every moment of loneliness, every scar, every doubt, dissolved into the warmth of that love. She turned toward Jesus, overwhelmed. How can anyone deserve this? His eyes burned with both tenderness and authority. They cannot. No one earns this by their strength. It is mine to give, and I give it freely to those who turn to me. Heaven is not a prize for the flawless. It is a home for the forgiven. Abigail wept harder. She thought of friends at school, her little brother Caleb, her parents, her grandmother. Did they know this was real? Did they know eternity waited not as a vague idea, but as a promise? She longed to stay, to run into the fields that shimmered with music, to drink from the river of crystal, to kneel forever in the presence of the Lamb. Yet even as she longed, she knew this was not yet her forever. She had been shown this so she could tell others what awaited those who turned to him. The vision shifted, colors softening, music quieting. Jesus' gaze met hers again, carrying both joy and solemnity. Now you know both realities, he said. Hell is the absence of my presence. Heaven is the fullness of it, and you must speak of both. Abigail's heart burned with purpose, though fear lingered. She was only 15. Who would listen? But she also knew she could not be silent. The radiance of heaven softened into something new. Abigail blinked as the brilliance dimmed into strands of gold stretching out in every direction, glowing like living wires of light. They wove together, endless and intricate, rising and falling like a tapestry too vast for her eyes to hold. Each thread pulsed gently, as though alive, and when one brightened, the light rippled outward, touching countless others. She stared, awestruck. What is this? She whispered. Jesus stepped closer, his face glowing with warmth. These are the prayers of my people. Every cry, every word, every sigh lifted to me is woven here. Not one is ever lost. Abigail's breath caught. She reached toward one of the golden threads, and the moment her fingers brushed it, images sprang before her eyes. A mother kneeling beside her bed, whispering prayers through tears. A child folding hands before school, asking for courage. A man walking to work, silent lips moving with a prayer no one else could hear. Each prayer glowed on the thread, shimmering with life, carried forward into eternity. The main emotion filling her was awe, realization that nothing spoken to God ever vanished. Jesus pointed to one thread. It began faint, almost invisible, but then light surged through it, racing along its length, branching into others, multiplying like sparks across dry grass. "Watch," he said. Abigail saw what followed. A young woman praying for her friend to find hope. That one prayer rippled outward, stirring a stranger to speak kindness, moving a neighbor to offer help, prompting a teacher to notice a student's pain. Each act born of that prayer touched another life, and the light spread farther than the woman could ever know. Abigail's heart swelled. The tidbit of knowledge pressed deep into her. Even the smallest prayer, whispered with weak faith, was stronger than she had ever imagined. She thought of her own half-hearted prayers, quick whispers in bed, words she wasn't even sure reached heaven. "Do mine matter too?" she asked, voice trembling. Jesus' eyes softened. "Especially those. Sincerity, not eloquence, is what carries weight. A single prayer from a sincere heart weaves itself into eternity, touching lives far beyond what you see. Not one word, not one sigh, not one tear is wasted." He led her deeper into the golden web. Abigail's eyes caught on a bright, pulsing strand. When Jesus touched it, a memory flashed. Herself months earlier, sitting in her room, praying quietly for a classmate she knew was struggling. She had felt silly then, wondering if her words mattered. Now she saw the ripple. That prayer gave her classmate courage to open up to a counselor. It nudged the girl's mother to check in that night. It stirred a teacher to speak encouragement the next morning. And those moments together had prevented a tragedy that would have altered the girl's life forever. Abigail gasped. Tears filled her eyes. She had never known. Jesus placed a hand on her shoulder. "In the days ahead, when waters rise, when lights fail, when fear spreads, prayer will not just be helpful, it will be essential. Encourage them to pray for one another, for nations, for hearts to return to me. Prayer will hold back the darkness." The golden threads glowed brighter, stretching into infinity, rippling with power. Abigail knew she would never forget this vision. It was more than comfort. It was a lifeline for the world she was returning to. As the tapestry faded back into living light, Jesus' gaze grew solemn again. "You have seen what is coming. You have seen eternity without me. You have seen the power I have placed in those who believe. Now there is one more thing you must hear before you return." Abigail's heart tightened. Return? She wasn't ready, but she could already feel the shift beginning. The golden tapestry of prayer dissolved into light, so warm that Abigail thought she was back at the beginning. But this time she knew. The embrace she felt was not her forever. It was the threshold before her return. Jesus stood before her, radiant, his eyes steady with tenderness and purpose. "Abigail," he said, his voice carrying through her spirit like a river, "everything you have seen, the waters, the silence, the sickness, the reality of hell, the joy of heaven, the power of prayer, it was not for you alone. I am sending you back. You will be a voice to many." Her heart trembled. Fear and longing warred inside her. "But I'm just a girl," she whispered. "People won't believe me. Some will laugh. Others will say I made it up." His presence drew closer, stronger than ever, filling her with both fire and calm. "Truth does not depend on whether they believe you. Your task is not to convince every ear. It is to speak faithfully to every heart I place before you. Some will reject it, but others will remember your words in their darkest hour, and then they will call on me." Abigail lowered her gaze, tears stinging. "What do you want me to tell them?" Jesus lifted her chin so her eyes met his. His gaze burned with love and authority. "Tell them that I am real. Tell them that I am the only way, the truth, and the life. Tell them to prepare, not only with food or shelter, but with hearts rooted in faith. Warn them about the waters that will test compassion, the silence that will test trust, and the fear that will test love. Tell them that my love is the only power strong enough to endure. And tell them that eternity is real. Every soul will spend it with me or apart from me. This choice cannot be delayed." The main emotion that filled Abigail was both awe and dread. Awe at the privilege of carrying such a message, dread at the weight of it. But when he asked, "Will you be faithful?" she felt strength stir inside her. "Yes, Lord, she whispered, voice trembling but sure. He stepped forward and wrapped her in his arms. The embrace was everything: fire and water, rest and strength, safety and calling. She felt love pour into every corner of her soul, sealing the visions into her memory like words etched in stone. She could have stayed there forever. But then the shift began. The light around them narrowed into a tunnel again, pulling at her with irresistible force. She gasped, clinging tighter. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, he said, his voice steady. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to go forward in spite of it. You will not be alone. A part of you will always remember the way home. The tidbit of knowledge pressed into her spirit. True courage is obedience, even when fear lingers. Then the embrace faded. The tunnel rushed around her, faster and faster. The peace of eternity gave way to pain, sharp, crushing pain in her chest. Voices grew louder, urgent, shouting, desperate. Got a pulse? Stay with us. Keep going. Her eyes fluttered open to blinding lights, masks over her face, hands pressing on her body. Sirens wailed, machines beeped. The paramedic's eyes locked on hers, firm but kind. You're back, sweetheart. You're with us now. The hospital ceiling came into focus above Abigail, white and sterile, a sharp contrast to the living light she had just left. Machines beeped steadily at her side. Her mother gripped her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her father stood in the corner, his eyes red, whispering a prayer she had never heard from him before. Abigail blinked, her body heavy, her lungs aching. But her spirit burned. She remembered everything. The roar of waters swallowing cities, the silence of a powerless world, the sickness that divided hearts, the torment of hell, the glory of heaven, the golden web of prayer, and the arms of Jesus himself. Nothing had been erased. It pulsed inside her like fire. In the first days, she struggled to explain. Doctors told her she had suffered sudden cardiac arrest, that she had been without a heartbeat for nearly 4 minutes, that survival, without brain damage, was a miracle. She nodded politely, but in her heart she knew. It was mercy. It was mission. At night, when the room grew quiet, she heard echoes of the cries from hell and the songs of heaven. She could still feel the weight of Jesus' eyes urging her, tell them. Normal life was no longer possible. She had crossed eternity and returned with truth. She could not keep silent. Her first steps were small. She told her parents, her grandmother, her best friend Hannah, the one who had pressed on her chest and wept as her life slipped away. Some believed instantly. Her father's eyes filled with awe. Her grandmother clasped her hands with trembling joy. Others listened politely, unsure, shifting in their seats. A few laughed nervously, calling it a dream. But Abigail remembered what Jesus had said. Her task was not to convince every ear, only to speak faithfully. And so she spoke. Soon a small group began gathering in her living room. Her family, Hannah, a neighbor, 2 classmates. They prayed together. They opened the Bible together. They talked not about hoarding supplies or predicting dates, but about preparing hearts, learning to forgive quickly, to trust God in silence, to love boldly when fear pressed in. The tidbit of knowledge she carried to them was simple but unshakable. Every prayer mattered. She told them of the golden threads she had seen, how even the weakest whispers shaped eternity. It gave courage to the hesitant, strength to the weary. Abigail's body healed slowly. A device was implanted to steady her heart, but she no longer feared. She knew every breath was borrowed time, a gift to be spent faithfully. Months later, she stood in a church sanctuary filled beyond capacity. She told her story from the beginning. The hike, the collapse, the tunnel of light, the eyes of Jesus. She spoke of the 3 trials before 2026, waters that would test compassion, silence that would test trust, fear that would test love. She spoke of hell's cries, heaven's peace, and the power of prayer. Her voice shook at times, but she pressed forward, knowing this was her call. Not everyone believed. Some dismissed it, some argued. But many wept, many prayed, and many left changed. Abigail had been faithful. The main emotion that anchored her now was urgency. Not the panic of fear, but the steady fire of purpose. Time was short. People needed to know. Eternity was not distant. It was at the door. And so she continued. One story, one prayer, one gathering at a time. Not to frighten, but to awaken. Not to glorify herself, but to glorify the one who had sent her back. Her words carried a choice to everyone who heard. Compassion or selfishness when waters rise. Trust or panic when silence falls. Love or division when fear spreads. And beyond all those trials, the greater choice remained. Eternity with Jesus or eternity apart from him. And so Abigail's story closes, though her mission continues. She was 15 years old, a girl from a quiet town, when death opened its door and Jesus met her on the other side. She saw oceans swallowing coasts, silence blanketing cities, sickness dividing hearts. She saw the cries of the lost and the songs of the redeemed. She saw the threads of prayer weaving eternity and learned that not one whisper of faith is wasted. She returned with fire in her chest, carrying not fear, but urgency. For the world will shake, yes, but it will not be lost to those who place their trust in him. The floods will test compassion, the silence will test trust, the sickness will test love. Yet in each trial, those who cling to Christ will find strength that the world cannot steal. Her story is not meant to entertain. It is not meant to satisfy curiosity. It is a call to prepare, not only with food or shelter, but with hearts surrendered, with faith alive, with love unbroken. You have heard her journey. You have felt the weight of what she saw. Now the choice rests with you. Will you let fear master you? Or will you let faith carry you? Will you live as though tomorrow is guaranteed? Or will you prepare your soul today? The time is short. The invitation is open. If these words resonate with you, please write an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.